So it's wonderful, wonderful to be here today. What I'd like to do is share with you some insights and some lessons. There are 10 in particular. One is actually a very short and brief lesson, something that you can do which will change your trajectory as an entrepreneur or a financer. How many people in here are or would like to start a company at some point in their life? Wonderful. So let's jump right in so we can get to questions. Number 10, know where to start and keep your eyes on the buoys. I participate in the sport of triathlon. This is the start. You obviously want to know if you're in the front, you could get run over. I've actually been run over. I've had people scratch me, kick me. It gets a little hairy when you're swimming in a triathlon, especially a full start open water swim. But as an entrepreneur, you want to know where you are, and you want to be able to identify the buoys. In this case, you start the race. In this case, you start a different race. So where are you in your growth stage? And what I mean, and this is a wonderful chart, it's an older chart, but if you're at the concept stage, the startup stage, the growth stage, or the later stage, there are different types of investors that will be attracted to your venture. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're hitting a private equity group and you have a startup idea, that may not be the most appropriate place to start because these investors look at investments at different stages of the risk curve. And there are two things to pay very particular attention to on your risk curve as an entrepreneur. Number one is investment, and number two is sales. Sales is, of course, everyone's favorite because it's not dilutive. So as you are increasing your sales, the risk curve goes down, and the profile of the investors that you are soliciting changes. You can maybe get a grant when you have a concept. You can maybe find angel investors, private family offices to support you. You actually then move to startup phase when you hit seed capital. You get into growth phase where the venture capitalist will want to see traction. They'll want to see things happening in sales or user acquisition. So know where you are before you get out in the marketplace to solicit investment. That's number 10. The buoys, also part of number 10. Something happens when you get ready to sell your venture, and I've been involved in selling several ventures and starting several ventures, but there's this wonderful, magical thing called the due diligence checklist. If you haven't seen a due diligence checklist from your attorney, have them send you one, and then set those buoys into your organization so that you can actually build an organization in a tracked fashion to be able to understand exactly what an investor is going to look for or an acquirer is going to look for. The due diligence checklist are the buoys that you need to follow when you're starting your business. Number 9, find your 28. Does anyone in here remember the game of Chutes and Ladders? Right? Raise your hand. Chutes and Ladders, right here. So what happens when you land on number 28? When you land on number 28, you get to go all the way up to number 84. And everyone knows, everyone has a cell phone and people in your cell phone that you just don't want to answer the call from, right? Those are probably number 87s. The reality is that there are people in your life and there are people that you will meet who can actually be your number 28. But so much time is spent on people that aren't your number 28. So find your number 28, start interacting to find other people who could be your number 28, and that will change your life. I know it's changed mine. Number 8, shape your idea. Very important to think about the concept of building a sandcastle. And I love to build sandcastles, except I only know how to build one sandcastle. And there's a picture of it on this 2 slides from now. But when you're building a sandcastle, and this is something that's important when it comes especially to technology investing, and I'll share with you the technology way to share your idea, which is something that's so intuitive and so natural, but so many entrepreneurs just don't do it. The reality is, in this case, you have someone making a pile of sand, and these folks are kind of looking at him like, what are you making? And I find the same experience. If I go to the beach and I make a giant pile of sand, kids will walk by And they'll walk by and they won't get involved. But then, as soon as I start to add form, shape, and function to the sandcastle, not really function other than fun, but as soon as I start to add form, and my sandcastle is a Mayan sandcastle, it's a heaping pile of sand, and in the heaping pile of sand I go step, 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 step. Incredibly easy to build. You just need to go find a long board somewhere and walk to the sandcastle and cut and push. But as soon as I start to do that, almost by the second or third step, I'll have a very different reaction from these kids. And it's not entirely unsimilar from a reaction you'll get from an investor or from a venture capital provider or someone who is involved. Because now they can see what it is that you're building. And you'll have a bunch of folks that come up and say, hey, can I dig a tunnel? You'll have some folks that'll come up and say, can I build a wall around the sandcastle? I like to think those guys will be lawyers later in life. But it's interesting because what is that form and function of the sandcastle that you build that other people will come and help you take part in? In technology, it's very simple and it's called a screenshot. The number of people that have pitched me on ideas that have shared with me this conceptual business in a paragraph, but haven't actually shown me screenshots of their dream and their idea. And I don't mean just the first page. I mean multiple pages that can clearly communicate to me what it is that they're building and what the user experience looks like is really incredible. Because if you're going to show someone what you are creating, create it. Even if you don't code it yet, create it as if it's been coded. That will, again, change your entrepreneurial career. Number 7, prepare for a long and windy road. In this race, the Ironman Triathlon in Hawaii, which is a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and then a marathon run, it gets very, very windy, especially in the race in Hawaii, but all of the races all over the world. And you can get, 20, 30-mile-an-hour headwinds, and you're on a bike that's maybe 18 pounds, and the headwinds can knock people over into the lava. It can change your course in an instant. And in the process of becoming an entrepreneur, your course can change really, really quickly. You can have a lot of headwinds. It can be difficult to get financing. It can be, team problems and management issues. And it can also just be something as simple as the technology doesn't work for that day, and you need to make sure it works the next day. So prepare for a long and windy road. This is actually my wife and I traveling back from Hawaii. We got a drafting penalty in this race. It was actually our honeymoon, although she's been very clear and told me that did not count as our honeymoon when we went and did a half Ironman. But what happens is you think the road looks like that. And when people first get involved and start a company, they kind of hope it looks like that. But the reality is it looks a lot more like that. And I'm not talking just about the pivot and the different iterations that your business might take on and the form it might take, but there is something very, very specific about understanding going in that what is going to happen when you're in the process of being involved in starting a business is not going to look like what you think it looks like. So go in with that expectation. Be aware that things are not going to be what you think, because that will change your perspective when you're there, and you will expect the unexpected. It's a very common term, but most people still don't go into that. And I'll get calls from companies that I've been on their advisory board from people, and they're in a panic about something. And I'll try and calm them down and have them look through the weeds and say, look, it's just a weed. The process is very long. Entrepreneurship is an endurance sport. You have to have the long view. Number 6. Read this book. This book that I'm going to share with you in a second is one that certainly changed my career, and on both sides of the equation, on the investing side as well as the entrepreneurial side. And the book is called Venture Deals. They just came out with a new edition, Be Smarter Than Your Lawyer and Your Venture Capitalist. And this book is mandatory reading for anyone that wants to become an entrepreneur or that wants to participate in the ecosystem of creating a company. And I think you'll really enjoy it. It's a great read, and I highly recommend it. Number 5, it's all about the transitions. This is an interesting concept, and more recently in technology, you've heard this concept of the pivot, where you instantly change your business into another model. We actually went through a pivot at events.com. We used to be working on something completely different. We actually pitched at Vator and met investors who invested before we pivoted that are still our investors. We had a wonderful experience with our pivot because we did something called a protected pivot, where you maintain the assets and then you hopefully will sell them. But when you actually think about your transitions, do them fast. In fact, they give an award every year at certain races for the shortest transition and the longest transition. And they always joke about some folks that spend a few hours in transition between their bike and their run, or the swim and their bike, and they think, what were you doing? But the reality is many companies know they need to change, know they need to shift their focus, know they need to do something, but they take too long to do it. And not only are races lost by the time it takes you to transition, because at the end of the day, if it's only a few minutes between you and the winner, or you and the loser, or you in the second and third and fourth place, it could happen because of how fast you transition. Because remember this, if you're transitioning your business model from one business to another, when you get in that other business, other people have already been in that race and moving really fast for a really long time. So transition quickly. Here's an example of how Instagram started, and I'm just going to take you through this. It's a wonderful thing from funders and founders. So Kevin learned to code after work at night. He built a prototype called Bourbon. I don't know if you guys knew that. It used to be called Bourbon. He gave it to friends to use. He met investors at a party. He showed them. He quit his job. He got $500,000 in financing. He found a co-founder, Mike. They looked what they had, which was an app that did everything from check-ins to photos. They decided to focus on one thing, and I would argue that one of the most powerful forces in the entrepreneurial universe is focus. Because they'll say to you things like, you can't boil the ocean, you can't do everything all at once, and it's true. You can have a plan to do a lot, but you have to have an immediate plan for what you're going to do to be successful, to put the bricks underneath the foundation of your business. So let's see, where are we? They prototyped the photo sharing app. They built a pretty awful photo app. They went back to the old version Bourbon. They made Bourbon into an iPhone app and it felt cluttered. They threw out everything, only left the photos. They renamed it Instagram. They launched on a Monday, and within a few hours, they became the #1 photo app. It's a great story. Number 4, ask for help. This is an interesting dynamic in the process of raising capital and in the process of working with people in life. The reality is people want to help you. And the value exchange you can get from strategic investors that can provide you not just with capital, but with advice, with networking, and with relationships is vast. And many investors will tell you that that's what they're going to do. And very few investors will actually have the time to or actually do it. And most of the time, it's your fault because you're not asking for help. You're not creating a structured environment by which your investors can provide you with help. You're not sending out a true form survey that allows them to say, here's how we need help. Here's what we're working on. Here's how you can help us. And asking for help goes even further than the investors and asking the investors for help. It goes as far as a situation that happened in my life, which I think will shock you. True story. Sent in a business plan for an investment proposal for a company that I was founding. This was a while ago. Sent it to the investor. When we sent that in, we received the Dear John letter. We received the no thanks, we don't think this market will ever get big enough, things aren't going to work out. But then, guess what happened? I went to a conference where we were pitching and there was a panel judging. And one of the folks on the panel was the venture capital group that had already said no, right? They already said no. So the approach was, listen, you've already said no. Can you tell me not only why, but what would you do with this business? How would you grow this business? What would happen to make it worth something? And he came to the office. He actually went up on the roof and saw that we had hired all these kids from UCSD. They were cog-sci engineers, and we were up on the roof with no railings, hammering out code. And he started to get an understanding of how he could help this business. And no joke, and these are not the accurate letters of rejection and the wire receipt, but within a very few number of weeks, we had a wire in our account for $5 million from the organization that said no. So asking for help is a very different approach when you're working with people, because if they feel that they can not only add value by adding capital, but get an extra kick because they're adding value by adding their network, their impact, their experience, their influence, that becomes a better return for them. It's mathematical. It's a mathematical certainty that you can get a better oomph in that manner. So number 3 is look for clues. When you're looking for clues in a business, and I'll just give you an example here. This is the Paris Marathon after the start. And after the start of the Paris Marathon, there's a lot of garbage around. And so most people look at this and they're like, wow, who's going to have to clean that up? But an entrepreneur will look at that photo completely differently. An entrepreneur will look at that photo and look for clues for the economics that are moving around in this photo and seeing, hey, here's a garbage bag that you could print a giant Nike logo on and hand out garbage bags to keep people warm before the event. Here's a water bottle that could be a sponsor for the event. Here's a set of jackets that we can make sure to sell people because it's obviously cold the race morning. So afterwards, we should be able to sell jackets. In everything you're doing, there's a clue. In fact, every single thing in this room, yourselves included, were once a neuron in someone's brain, and yet now you can touch them, you can feel them. They exist. And the people who created them, whether it's the light or the cushion you're sitting on or the chair, it was all a neuron in somebody's brain at some point. So look for clues. And what are the clues you look for? And of course, there's Google Analytics, there's things you can look through. But for us, for example, we look in a company I co-founded called events.com, we look at the transaction and all the things that can happen around it. And you should too. In any business that you're doing, for example, in events, we do registration, but you can also sell event cancellation insurance, and so on, and so on, and so on. Remember, if you're doing one thing as a business, understand the ecosystem that exists around it and see how you can integrate into that ecosystem. It's very important, and it'll help you enhance the story that you're telling in the business you're building. So number 2, entrepreneurship and fundraising are both more of an art than a science. Michael Robertson is who I borrowed this quote from. Entrepreneurship is more of an art, fundraising is more of an art than a science. So what do I mean by that? Because that's kind of a loose comment. How can you use that in practical application? Well, here are 3 ways. Number 1, you should all have a 90-second video pitch. Now, 90 seconds, when I say 90-second video pitch, sounds short. But if I stood here and counted to 90, you would be bored by like 10. Let's try it. 1, 2, 3, 4, not even at 5 yet. 5, 6, 7, kind of like you're standing in front of the microwave. 8, 9, 10. So think about 90 seconds, and maybe you make it a minute, but you should all have a 90-second video pitch that is very clear and very clean. And I'm going to share with you an example, the one that we put together for a challenge that Richard Branson put on in just a second. And we put a 90-second video pitch, and it gives you each of the topic headers that you need to have for the business as you're building that business. And please borrow those topic headers. Use that video as your draft when you're out there building your business. Number 2, connect in person. Because people are going to ask you, and there's people that have said to me, they will look at, would I trust the CEO, and for that matter, the entire executive team with my kids? And also break out of your email. People invest in people. Yes, you want to have a great business, but if you're not there when you're actually being able to create something, it's going to be a challenge. And submitting a bunch of business plans and proposals and emails, you need to break out. You need to go to great events. In fact, Vator, which is a wonderful organization, and I'm very grateful for their opportunity when we first went on stage as a nervous startup back in the day to where we are today, having raised a significant amount of capital in different stages of our company's growth. There is a great networking opportunity amongst the events that Vator puts on, and also entrepreneurial events, investment events, etc. And if you're new, or if you're a student, or you're just getting started, go as a volunteer. Some of the events are all around the world. Travel, but get out of your email. So let's take a look at the 90-second video pitch and remember the headers. And if you have a pen and you're writing things down, just remember the headers.
We are creating a company that will change the world. To do that, 8 things are essential. Number 1, you need a great name for the business. Number 2, you need the angel investors who will be incredibly strategic for you. Number 3, you need a mission statement that's really clear. Something like, events.com is the platform at the center of the global events ecosystem. Number 4, you need a massive market. Number 5, you need the super friends of management. Number 6, you need to have a very clear way you're going to make money. Number 7, you need to do something disruptive like and number 8, traction. We've achieved some unbelievable milestones in the process of creating a business that will control the discovery, the interaction, and the transactions associated with the things that matter in people's lives. That is the story of events.com.
So that was 90 seconds. That was just 90 seconds. Get your pitch down to that length and get the topics that I addressed in that video into your pitch so that people can understand it and get behind you. So here it is, guys. The number 1 10-second funding secret. Use both. Use both. DocuSign. If you don't know what DocuSign is, it's a digital signature platform that you can send to the people that you're getting into a business partnership, an investor relationship, a contract with a sales contract. And that is one platform that people use, and this is another platform that people use. Remember these Sign Here tabs, where you can send a Federal Express envelope with a copy for their records, with a Sign Here tab, with your proposal, and the actual documents for them to sign. This is a force function for this, and this is a force function for that. So use both when you're trying to get folks to participate in the venture in any form that involves contractual negotiations. So wrapping up, thank you for your time. The question for you is, what kind of a startup do you want to be? What kind of a startup entrepreneur do you want to be? And this is an older photo you may have seen, floating around the web, but that horse definitely has too much email, too many things happening, too many people in his office. And the other horse is out there running, obviously, freely. And I'm going to end with a quote. Who here saw the movie The Martian? So this I'm going to borrow from our CFO. And so different startups go through different chapters and challenges. And during one of the more challenging chapters that he actually helped us sail through quite successfully, he walked into the office and said, hey, guys, I know we were dealing with some stuff, and thankfully he helped solve those issues. But he read us a quote from The Martian. And it was a really inspiring quote, because things seem so much bigger than they are if you have the mentality just to stay in the race and to keep fighting. And so here was the quote, and the folks that have been watching the movie on repeat on cable or any of the networks probably know the exact quote I'm going to say, but Mark Watney. When I was up there, stranded by myself, did I think I was going to die? Yes, absolutely. And that's what you need to know going in, because it's going to happen to you. This is space, entrepreneurship. It does not cooperate. At some point, everything is going to go south on you. Everything is going to go south, and you're going to say, this is it. This is how I end. Now, you can either accept that, or you can get to work. That's all it is. You just begin. You do the math. You solve one problem, then you solve the next, and the next, and the next thing you know, when you solve enough problems, you get to come home.
Let's give a round of applause.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.